Next, it is my great honor to introduce my congressman, the father of Volution, as many of you have heard. And I am going to take a couple minutes to sing his praises because, frankly, the kind of leadership that Earl has demonstrated in the U.S. Congress is probably the most rare commodity in our country right now. And Earl, like Gordon, also started as a city councilor. He was a city councilor in the city here of Portland. He understands cities because of that experience. He was also Commissioner of Public Works, and that helped him understand infrastructure, and he's become really the national leader on what we need to do about our national infrastructure. He understands counties because he was a county commissioner. Even rolling back further than that, and this I love, Earl ran for and won a seat in the state legislature when he was 23. Now, how many of you young revolutionaries out there, or new, I guess you're calling new rail-volutionaries, are still sitting around wondering what you're going to do? Come on, get on it. We need new leaders. If Earl could be a state legislator at 23, so can you. So Earl then ran, after all those successes, for the U.S. Congress in 1996 and has been there ever since. And he really brought that knowledge of communities to the U.S. Congress. That's where he really was the main partner with our communities. He helped us get the kinds of complete communities, the livability. He really, I probably coined the term livable communities. He was making Portland a sustainable city and this region a sustainable region before people were talking about sustainability. It was not part of the vernacular. So he's really been a tremendous, tremendous leader and a tremendous ally for the people in this room and the kinds of things that we value. At Congress, he founded the Bike Caucus, the Congressional Bike Caucus. He co-founded the House Livable Communities Task Force. He's been a leading advocate for multimodal transportation, for housing choice, for the environment. He's just been there on all the important issues for our communities. He is currently a member of the powerful, I love this, the Powerful Ways and Means Committee. You never hear Ways and Means Committee. It's always the Powerful Ways and Means Committee. And for good reason, because you have the purse strings, right? And he is co-chair of the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming, which frankly gives me a great deal of hope that our nation will come out of its denial about how to deal with those incredible issues. So please join me in thanking my Congressman Earl Blumenauer and welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Gordon, I appreciate the picture of our community through your eyes. And it actually summons up sort of the angst that I have for this presentation. It was a great sort of introduction for me to sort of calm down, because I talk for a living, but this is the most difficult speech I give every year. Every year it gets harder, not just because some of you have actually heard all of these presentations. How many were there at the Westminster Presbyterian Church at the first of the... Yes, Ellen? Who else is there? GB? Alan? Is that... Andy? You're really right. You can't see here, Rex. So you can see some of these people, despite that, come back, and I do appreciate it. But it's harder, in part, because there is so much that we have to celebrate. There's so much yet to do, and it's actually more important now than ever. When we started, Volution was about espousing good ideas, strengthening communities, improving the quality of life, helping transform our light rail line into a system that could help define our community's future growth. Sort of the arts and crafts stuff. It was good and desirable, but we have seen it move beyond that. We've largely accomplished the goal of helping transform the line into a system. It's helping define the development for the region. But these issues have moved beyond the desirable to center stage, beyond just the good idea and a good quality of life, to the important, to the critical, and I would be prepared to argue to the urgent public policies of our time. We have seen how sustainable, well-planned communities with balanced transportation choices can avoid being hollowed out shells in the aftermath of real estate bubbles. Building communities resistant to disaster, both natural and human caused. Today, our challenges are the health of the economy, the health of our citizens, and the health of the planet. This week, we will discuss and celebrate and learn from each other all of these successes, all of these challenges for our time. We are delighted once again to host the conference in Portland. In part, we are proud of the accomplishments in the region. We're going to talk a lot in the course of the week about Portland, but that's code. It's not just Portland. It is our region. It is our popularly elected regional government that includes 25 cities and a well-defined urban growth boundary. Informed, I will say, by our statewide planning goals and a commitment to working together to solve problems. At times it gets a little messy around the edges. At times tempers show. People can be cranky. But there is, at core, there has been a shared commitment to working together. Now, the conference, as I say, started to help us shape the region and transform the line into a system. But from the beginning, there was a sense that it would go beyond simply light rail. You've already heard a lot about the reintroduction of the modern streetcar into American cities. It has been a dream of mine for 25 years, and I believe in it more fervently today than I did a quarter century ago. The streetcar has proven to be a powerful addition to our urban toolkit. It is quick and inexpensive to build, and since we're back in established right-of-way, there aren't the neighborhood and environmental challenges. It is a powerful extension to the pedestrian experience, which, after all, is at core about what we are talking about. And, as you will hear endlessly, it has been a magnet for development. But it is part of having a rich mix of transportation options. You will hear people talk about the trip not taken. Before I die, I want to change federal policies, not just to make them more neutral towards that, but actually to embrace it. When my friend, local developer John Carroll, builds a high-rise development in the heart of the city, you can just visualize 1 million pounds of carbon that isn't expended because people are there in the middle of that urban experience. You'll hear a little bit about cycling. We are aggressively bike partisan in this community. It, too, is one of the indicator species of a livable community, the most efficient form of urban transportation ever designed. And it extends the experience, again, like the streetcar, making transit facilities accessible to bikes, enable people to move out into that suburban wasteland that was referenced and be able to have access to transit. But collectively, all of the choices, the land use, the urbanization, making it not illegal to live above the drugstore in which a person works. Having an array of those means that in our community we are driving 20% less than the national average. It's one of the reasons why our community is one where young people continue to move, well-educated young people continue to move without jobs. It's one of the reasons we've got a high unemployment rate. They come here for the experience. I mean, you can't swing a dead cat in Portland without hitting a restaurant that has been reviewed in the New York Times. And that Beervana map that Gordon had up there, that social lubricant. We have more breweries, not just per capita, more than any city in the world. It's beer, it's bread, it's the new distilleries that are coming online. This is providing a framework. I mean, I have to take an extra hour to go to the farmer's market because of the quality of that urban experience. And we have more per capita in Oregon than any place else in the country, providing that direct, so you can actually see who grew that chicken, where that apple came from. It is a qualitative experience that people are hungry for, that provide value, and that 20% less means that they have 25 less driving, means the average family has $2,500 a year more to spend at that independent bookstore, to spend in that restaurant, that brew pub, for education, for housing. It has played a major role in developing new areas of the economy. What is happening in terms of quality food and restaurant experience is making it possible for farmers to actually have a more viable living. It is making it possible in terms of cycling. It's not just something that we like to do. It is a viable sector of our local economy. Over 1,000 people work in the cycling industry. It's approaching $100 million a year. In a little community like ours, that's a big deal. You've heard the reference to the manufacturing of the first American-built streetcar in 58 years. Well, Oregon Iron Works is contracting with people throughout the Midwest for components, and if we're successful in the 100 communities around the country that are interested in streetcars, more than 24 that are getting serious about it, it's making a difference in our community. We've got 1,700 people at work right now extending the streetcar to the east side, but we've got lots of people who are making a living working with you, spreading that message, designing, constructing, and building. The things that we're talking about here, getting back to the basics of a livable community, are elements of a new sustainable economy that connect people, that coax value, that make people want to invest more in that bunch of broccoli that they buy at a farmer's market, that people spend a little more at the local bookstore maybe than buying it online. But it's the quality of the urban experience and brings people together. You know it, that's why you're here. We've got an opportunity to drive that message and drive those practices all across the country. And I guess that is the second message that I wanted to leave with you, and, well, live with it, you know, as I think about it. And I go someplace every month. I have literally lost track of the hundreds of cities that I visited. It's north of 300. And I will tell you, I am excited each trip I take. When I see what has happened in communities around the country where 20 years ago you were taking your life in your hands. We were joking last night with some of the folks from Utah. I mean, I think I contributed to the poor general manager being fired because he invited me to talk to the board and the community about light rail and some of this development stuff. But Salt Lake, my goodness, What has happened? What a transformation. Phoenix, I was part of the debate for Valtrans over 2 decades ago, and now they've opened a light rail line in Phoenix with $6 billion of development by the time it opened December 26th of last year. What you are part of around the country is a success story. Every community now is starting to recognize those streetcar neighborhoods, that mixed-use development, that historic district that they're proud of, or coming back in terms of revitalization and green buildings. It's happening everywhere, and it is exciting. It is exciting to me to watch some of the changes with the federal government. We have been crusading now for most of this new century for a different vision to rebuild and renew America. And I am so pleased that the Obama administration, in 4 months, figured out what to do, what the previous administration couldn't do in 4 years in terms of approving streetcars. And the Tiger grants with the urban circulators, just another word for streetcar, For the massive investment in higher speed rail. Now, admittedly, the Chinese will spend more than we will in the next 6 weeks in that entire budget. But remember when we were celebrating prying the foot off Amtrak's air hose and getting $550 million? $14 billion is a step in the right direction. The Tiger grants, the energy efficiency, over $5 billion in upgrading the federal building inventory. 360 million square feet across America, making an investment in greening that. It is, I think, truly exciting. Nothing more, though, than having the secretaries of HUD and Transportation, Sean Donovan and Ray LaHood. I think Ray's the best transportation secretary I've ever worked with. Lisa Jackson, the administrator of EPA, working together on Livable Communities initiatives. But as refreshing as that change is, we've still got a long way to go. Congress is still working, let's see, the 8th year of the 6-year reauthorization. A little frustrating. We've had some modest problems with the Senate, kind of a big hospice where good House bills go to die. But as my staff reminds me when I say that, a hospice is where they treat you nicely. But you are part of this movement to build a low-carbon, sustainable big picture with a new federal partnership that's comprehensive. We need, obviously, to reauthorize the Surface Transportation Act, but it's also sewer and water, energy, broadband. It's green infrastructure. It's how we use our land, and most important, how we put the pieces together. We need each and every one of your communities to be agitating for a better federal partnership and building your regional consensus. We need new partnerships to create, capture, and use the value that comes from doing this right. I know there are some people who think we've got some financial problems. We do. They are concerned about the federal deficit and revenues for transportation and for energy, and they should. But do not fall victim to the notion that we can't afford to do it right. That is fault. You know, and we need your help to drive the message that we are already spending far more than we need to renew and rebuild this country. Americans don't have to keep wasting more energy than anybody in the world. $1 billion a day that we ship overseas. We don't have to spend twice as much as developed countries for mediocre health results for too many people. We don't have to spend billions of dollars protecting West Germany from the Soviet Union when both countries disappeared 20 years ago. But think about the costs right now. Think about the costs of jailing. Think about the costs of failure in health care. Think about the costs of breakdown in transportation system. Think about the costs of leaking 6 billion gallons of water a day, enough to fill 9,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools that would stretch from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. We are spending money now for failure and limited vision and past mistakes and playing catch-up. We have the capacity to do it right and create value. We must stop giving away the value for the work that you are doing to the lucky or the politically connected. You are aware that if we had simply retained the land around freeway exchanges and auctioned it off after it was completed, we could have paid for the entire interstate freeway system. You are in the business of creating value. And we need to be bold about claiming a small portion of that value to be able to fund higher speed rail, streetcar, water improvements, park and open space, and affordable housing. The cost of bad food, wasted energy, government dealing with past mistakes, heat islands, unchecked runoff, flooding, wildfires, mudslides, sort of run this out. We've got a case to make. We can do it. The federal government needs to lead by example. You heard our mayor talk about almost $10 billion government dollars spent in this region. Think about what the federal government spends as the largest landowner, landlord, and employer in the United States. What is the transformational power of being able to deal with 37,000 post offices around the country, or the aforementioned 360 million square feet? The Department of Defense is the largest consumer of energy in the world. And we've talked in past conferences about the power of greening the military. I was so pleased 2 weeks ago to read about it on the front page of the New York Times. It's a strategic, they finally figured out it's a strategic liability to be petroleum dependent. It doesn't just cost $400 a gallon to deliver to our troops in Afghanistan, but it's a big bullseye for the terrorists. So they're getting serious about hybrids and solar, wind. Harnessing the power of greening the military can transform millions of acres in this country that's contaminated by military pollution and unexploded ordnance. My final point luckily for you. We can get on with the conference. My final point is that it is also a transition in terms of our mission. Because, yes, it's about healing the economy. It's about healing the planet. It's about strengthening neighborhoods. But any of you who had the temerity to switch on commercial television get a sense of the negativity, the hyper-partisanship, the disagreements that are taking place that have been carried to new lengths. Last summer, some of you may recall my little essay in the New York Times about my near-death panel experience, where I put in the health reform a bipartisan positive provision to make sure that families understood the circumstances they were facing as they approached end of life of a loved one, and that they had the capacity to make sure that their wishes were honored. Unanimous support. What a great idea, Earl. And it morphed into Sarah Palin's death panels. And notwithstanding the fact that PolitiFact judged it the political lie of the year, the fact was that it found fertile ground with people who were hostile, suspicious, angry. We're in a more challenging environment today because that is affecting everything we do. And I believe that as much of the new vision and the implementation of all these great things that we're going to talk about and learn from one another, perhaps the greatest contribution is being able to get back to the grassroots, to build the citizen infrastructure that, after all, spawned Volution, our transportation class, the initiatives to try and make sure that people here were our partners and we could do some things that were a little risky. And ultimately, they helped bring people together. The bike partisanship brings people together. People like streetcars. They love open space. They are obsessed with water if we do this right. You have an opportunity to move forward to heal the political process at a time that it is desperately, desperately needed. You know, some of you will recall a verse that we used when we were dealing with reauthorization before last, T21. And that verse was Isaiah 58:12. Those from among you shall build up the old waste places. You shall rise up the foundations of many generations. You will be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. It's good enough for Isaiah. Pretty good message for T21. I think it's a good thought for us to have in mind as we move forward with this conference and the mission ahead. Thank you very much.